right, welcome to First and Filoni. My name is Donovan Filoni, and with me, back from a little mini overtime work, is Andrew Cooper. How's it going, Andrew?
What's going on, dude?
Not much, man. Before we get started, some news to kind of cover. Some big news kind of broke. Um, this week, the NCAA adjusted the transfer portal to two things. So I'm going to read the two things out and kind of get live, uh, fresh take from it here. On the first one, the window in 2026 will only run for 2 weeks, from January 2nd until the 16th. And because of the 12-team playoff, it extends deep into January. The players participating in the postseason game after January 12th will have the opportunity to start the transfer process during a 5-day period that begins the day after the final postseason game. So just kind of adjusts it for people who are still playing the playoff and might want to transfer. And then the second one is the transfer portal, when a coach leaves, is shrinking from a 30-day window to a 15-day window. So it sounds like what they're doing is trying to modify the transfer portal a little bit to kind of get it a little bit more reined in, which is kind of like what we wanted. So what are your first thoughts on kind of just what I've read there?
Uh, you know how I feel about the transfer portal. Um, I guess what do you think about it? And I'll give you my thing.
Yeah, I think it's good. I think it's in the right direction. I wish they would have. It's tough to have the winter transfer portal um, defined with the school in session because school always starts around what, January 18th, 20th, something around there. So I like that they shrunk it down to be before that for the spring period, but it does provide a disadvantage for the teams that are still in the playoff. So whether that brings about more parity, that could be the case too. So I think it's moving in the right direction. I still think they should only do one transfer portal period, and I think it should
Yes,
be in the summertime.
that's kind of
Um,
what I'm getting at.
but the only problem with that is then you miss the spring games, spring training, spring football, everything like that for the players. So I think they're trying to make it better. Let's see how this. I think we should wait and see on the 15-day period. I think less people will transfer. Will transfer here, and I think that'll be better overall. But I think it's moving in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm biased when it comes to the transfer portal. I know there's situations that come up and everything, but I just feel like eventually, like we always talk about, it's going to have to get reined in a little bit. I just feel like if you transfer once, you either got to sit out a year
Right.
or if you transfer, you get two transfers, and after that, you're done.
Yeah, yeah. I think they're gonna. That's yeah. I don't know about sitting out for a year. Maybe depending on when they transfer, if they transfer late, maybe that would be a case like sit out for like 2 or 3 games of the season, first couple seasons. So kind of you have to spend X amount of months with the team, like 6 months with the team before you can play with them. Maybe that'll discourage transferring. But I also want to increase parity, so that's where we differ a little bit. So I think this would be a good compromise. So I kind of want to see how it goes forward though. But let's go ahead and get into Q1 here. We're going to start off with a basic recap of last week. This year's been crazy with some college football games, so we've been kind of splitting things up into more of a extensive recap session. Um, so what was a slow weekend on paper last week? Not really any crazy games like the week before. It actually turned out to be a great weekend in college football with a few comebacks and a few upsets. Um, what games had the biggest impact on the season going forward, and which games were the most exciting to you? Um, I have a couple, so if you wanna say your first one, I can kind of bounce off of that.
Um, look back here.
Or I'll give my first one here. First one I have, we'll say the obvious one first. Penn State losing to UCLA, right?
I didn't really want
Nobody's
to start with that, but
well, let's just knock it out because it's going to be probably continually popping up. Nobody really saw it coming, right? Nigo had the best game of his career, and first-time play caller Jerry Neuheisel who actually played quarterback for the Bruins, in the early 2000s, called the game. Once he learned how to turn his headset on, he didn't even know how to turn the headset on or talk into it or what was going on here. But Penn State just looked lost on defense. They have no depth. I picked them for the national title, man, and geez, I was really really wrong there. So um, those are just my basic initial thoughts on that game. Uh, how shocked were you for that outcome?
We always say it every year. They always have a game that they slip. And after, playing a pretty good Oregon team and doing what they did just to go out there, I don't know if it was
West Coast?
jet
Yeah,
lag or what, but you just, a team of that stature with so much limitations and, the first, what, 3 games, you're preparing yourself. Yeah, I don't know if they just overlooked them. I mean, what?
yeah, I don't know.
It's just crazy to me that James Franklin still has his job.
Well, yeah, so we'll talk about that, I guess, in quarter two a little bit. But what other games here, because there was a ton. I got five or six that I had mentioned here.
Um,
Where do you want to go next?
we can start with Texas.
All right, what you got?
Is Arch really the answer?
So I have a theory on that. I think he is. I think the kid has a lot on his plate. But when you think of Texas, it kind of goes with good offensive line play and good running backs, right? They're like in the hundreds, I believe, or in above 50, above 60 in rushing per game. Like they can't get the running game going, and that's a big thing for me. You have to have the running game going to be successful. And they're throwing the ball way more with receivers that are just not breaking away from the defensive backs. Um, not even uh who's the kid that they got? The young kid. I can't think of his name off the top of my head. But he's not even being able to break away because they're double teaming him on the back end because they know what they're going to do. I think they need to be able to establish. I think they got ahead of themselves thinking he was going to be a generational passing talent when he's more of a running threat. So let's run the ball a little bit more, and I think their game can turn around. Um, before I get in on Florida, what are your kind of thoughts on Arch? Do you think he's the answer, or are you um, selling your stock on him right now?
Uh, I mean, I just don't know if he's got. You can't really say he doesn't have the players around him because he's got the talent, but I just don't know if the expectations are just so high for him, and he's
Yeah,
just not. He's just not thinking. Yeah, it's hard to say because when you have a generational name like that, and it is a man, and you expect excellence, I guess,
yeah,
coming out of that pedigree, especially at the quarterback position. But like I said, I just don't know if he's putting too much pressure on himself and as far as game time goes, and he's
yeah,
just. I mean, I don't know.
yeah. I'd like to see him relax a little bit, but unfortunately, the SEC schedule is not going to really allow that. But let's get into Florida. What did you send me over the weekend? What is the most surefire bets? And number one was Billy Napier coaching for his job, uh, as in winning, right? Like so, Billy just he fought for his job, but what did he actually do, right? He finally started to run the ball with Jaden Baugh. Jaden Baugh had like 27 or 29 carries for over 110 yards. They had two freshman wide receivers starting, and their five-star Dallas Wilson actually started for the game as well, and he had over 100 yards for his first game in his college career. That was the Florida team that I thought was going to be at the beginning of the year. Now, can they keep it up? And similarly to last year, after their bye week, they turned it on and won what like 7, 8 games in a row. Can they do that again? I don't know, but if they keep playing like that, they're going to be a tough beat. But I know it's at home. I know it's against a struggling Texas team, so I'm not getting my hopes too up there.
Yeah, I mean, something about Billy and fighting for his job. It just seems like the team turns around, but I mean, I still think it's a little too late.
Yeah, I do too. something another team that might be a little too late here from everything that we're saying. Your UNC Tar Heels are talking about a potential buyout after the butt whooping that they had on Clemson. I knew that game was over just as soon as it started. 75-yard trick play touchdown pass for Clemson. I don't really think it does anything for Clemson's stock, but everybody's saying Bill Belichick's dead. Now UNC's talking about a potential buyout. Um, he just hasn't had a Bill. I'm not a Belichick fan, so I'm not defending him, but he hasn't had a recruiting cycle yet, right? And he got there really, really late after the transfer portal was already picked over. So let's give him a year. Let's let him get his guys in and make judgment next year. Do you have any thoughts on the Clemson UNC game or?
I kind of think this was the game, just watching a little bit that I could when I had the time. I just think that was, I know they're playing Carolina and, the kids they're just not in tune with each other, in sync, and it's all brand new coaching and that. But I really feel like that was a game that Klubnik needed to get his confidence back, I guess is the
Yeah,
best way to put it. It just looked like he was playing a little bit more freely. He was
yeah.
more, look as far as coverage goes, reading the coverage, and yeah, he was taking advantage of what the defense was giving him.
So you're saying Clemson's back in the ACC title
No, I'm not
conversation?
saying that. No,
No? Okay.
no.
Some other games that stay in the ACC, UVA beating Louisville in overtime. That was a crazy game. Louisville's, not a bad team, kind of flying under the radar, had a big comeback win versus Pitt. But UVA just kind of putting their stamp on things now. I'm not sure their defense is any good, but the only loss on the season was to your NC State Wolfpack there, right? And
Yeah, well, they should have won that one.
yeah, and they probably should have, but UVA's offense, I think they can kind of keep up with anybody. You should the ACC be worried about UVA? Like, should Miami, Florida State, Georgia Tech be worried about UVA going forward?
Well, they beat Florida State, so um,
Yeah, oh, they did. You're right. We did talk
um,
about that last week.
I mean, I like Tony Elliott. I always have, even when he was at Clemson. Like I said, it's yeah, people around here, oh, fire Tony Elliott. Man, just give him 3 to 4 years, especially with the tragedy that they had,
Yeah,
for UVA to stick with him and give him a chance just shows, that I really think they want to be all in on Tony Elliott. But I mean, as of right now, I mean, this is me being real. If he, which is Virginia probably will get bowl eligible. I think they're going to play Miami very close. Should the rest of the ACC be on notice, if they can get that defense where it gets a few more stops, yeah. But I wouldn't be surprised if Tony Elliott's coach of the year in the ACC.
I wouldn't be surprised if somebody in the SEC or Big Ten poaches him at the end of the year.
Uh, they might, but he hasn't had enough winning. You
But
know,
yeah, no, you're right there. But I think UVA's finally put NIL on the table this year.
well, yeah, well, it's like everybody, like we've talked about before. I mean, it's getting in that age where you have to pay to play, and I think the administration and everybody's seeing that. So, they gave him a little bit more money, and look what he's done with his roster.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a good question though, going forward is you're right. They were calling for his job last year and now they're saying coach of the year candidate. And I wouldn't be surprised if he's coach of the year, him or Cristobal in the ACC at this point. So, and we can talk about Cristobal here. Miami rolling against Florida State. Me and you called it, Libby called it. We all knew Florida State was kind of Fugay's team when we all saw Castellanos as their starting quarterback. But I think it's safe to say Miami, Ohio State, and Oregon are all the tier one teams in college football. And I'm not sure they're going to lose going forward until the playoffs when they see each other. Miami has a pretty easy schedule going forward, and they have that freshman. Talk about freshman wide receivers in Florida. At Miami, they got Tony, who's just lighting it up on everybody. He's going to be a top prospect going forward. Carson Beck really hasn't had to do anything, but he's playing really well. They're running the ball really well. Their defense is playing much, much, much better than last year. I have Miami at a steady number two over Oregon. but behind Ohio State. But I think that team will be a team to be reckoned with going into playoffs.
Without a doubt. I mean, the way they're playing right now, man. I mean, that's you can't ask for any better if you're a Miami fan.
Yeah. Talk about another good quarterback play. Sorsby from Cincinnati, man, I don't know if you saw any of that game. They were up like 24 points on Iowa State. And you know Iowa State, that's our team, right? Like with Larko Becht, but Cincinnati made that game look easy. I know Iowa State came back and was in within 8 points, but that game was never out of, or I mean, that was never in reach for Iowa State, I don't think. The Big 12 needs to watch out because I think there's another team right there in Cincinnati who can win it all. Give Texas Tech a run for their money, give Utah a run for their money. Did you watch any of that game or just saw kind of the highlights? I mean, they dominated that first quarter, first half.
No, I didn't get a chance to watch it. I kind of looked at it on my phone here and there. Been busy moving and doing all kinds of other stuff. But I looked one time, I think, when I walked by the TV, and I was like, "What in the world?"
Yeah, we had to turn it on to wonder what was going on because they were just like Cincinnati was having their way with it. And Sorsby under, dark horse for potential Heisman here. And then the final game that I kind of want to talk about is the Bama versus Vandy game. I thought it was a pretty close game. I thought Bama kind of was handling it for most of the game, but Vandy was scrappy. But I think what lost Vandy the game was the reason why Vandy's there in the first place, and that was Diego Pavia. I think he's the one who cost Vandy that game because of all the attention he was, talking against the fans, talking to the media about beating Alabama, talking, just talking crap to the players, and just didn't really focus on football this week. Thought he could do what he did last year, and I think that's ultimately why they lost the game. I know it was a 16-point game. They scored a late touchdown, and so it was, really a 7, 8 point game. But I think Pavia is the reason why, unfortunately, they lost that game.
Yeah, I mean, he's what's the best way to put it? I think he's trying to be somewhat of a Johnny Manziel of football.
Yeah. Well, Johnny was there too.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's fine to be cocky and all that, but eventually running your mouth's going to catch up with you, especially in college football.
Yeah. And I think Bama's back on track. They get a tough game this weekend versus Missouri, which should be a fun one to watch. So see what they do there. The Can DeBoer narrative is kind of slowed down for a little bit. Let's go ahead and move into quarter two and talk about potential grass is always greener, or not necessarily always greener. After Penn State's loss, people are calling for Franklin's job even more. As right or as wrong as that thinking may be, it kind of got me thinking, what schools could use a shakeup? Now, this isn't like the teams that are on the hot seat or anything like that. It's teams that are consistent, 8, 9, 10 wins every single year, but not much better than that. Doesn't really win against the bigger boys. Um, Typically what Penn State has been doing under Franklin is the, 10-win seasons, losing to the big guys, making a top 10 appearance, things like that. What teams do you think could use a shakeup? I have three of them. There's four that I can make a case for, but I think one of them you're going to make a case for. So I'll leave that to you. But my first one, and kind of got me thinking as well. Another reason behind this was Texas A&M last year. They hired Elko, changed their culture around last year, and now look at them now. First 5-0 start in what 70 years. So the first team that comes to my mind is LSU, right? They're the obvious answer for me. Kelly's been there for 4 years, and he's had pretty much 9, 10 wins every single year, but he just doesn't fit the mold down there. He's a northeastern guy in the heart of the deep south. I mean, let's just kind of be honest there as well. Their defense has been what's lacking, and they shouldn't be lacking because all the defensive talent that comes out of Louisiana just in general. Um, he has 6 more years left with like $60 million on his contract. We're not talking about contract buyouts or anything like that, but I think LSU could use a shakeup. They need a Southern coach. They need a coach that kind of speaks their language down there. I just don't think Kelly's a fit for. He might be a top 20 coach. I'll give him that, but I just don't think he's a fit for LSU. I have two more. Do you want to go with one of yours?
Yeah, one of mine is definitely Virginia Tech.
Okay.
I feel like right now the way that Tech's been what the last 3 to 4 years. You already know they want to get a new coach. Why not
Right.
bring in a James Franklin that might go at 10-2 or 9-3 for 3 or 4 years, then might have that one crazy season where he goes 11-1.
James Franklin in the ACC, though, I think would challenge immediately for the top spot with Cristobal and um, Davo. I think, don't you? And Norvell. I think he would be in the top four conversation almost immediately.
Yeah, I would say after the first year or two, yes.
Yeah. That's not where I thought you were going to go. So, if we don't hit the one I think you're going to say, we can.
I know which one you're thinking.
The next one I thought was USC, right? USC is having winning records, but another kind of like Virginia Tech with you, a more historic winning program. I'm not sure Riley's the answer when they brought him there from Oklahoma. Their offense seems to be there, but their defense just has not been there, and they lose to teams that they shouldn't. Um, and they're just, they can't, if they can't score 50 points, they're not going to win the game. So I think this is another coach doesn't fit the mold of it. You would think a high flying offensive offense would be good for USC, but if you look at USC's alumni and their defense is kind of what made those teams. Even though Matt Leinart, Reggie Bush, you talk about them, but like Troy Polamalu, Marcus Allen, like um, you know, people like that, I think kind of fit the mold too. Um, so I think that would be my number two team of Lincoln Riley at USC. I don't think they're going to fire him. I know he's been on and off the hot seat, but I think that could go for another shakeup. Maybe like this would be a perfect fit for Kalen DeBoer, to be honest, 'cause he's a West Coast guy. Um,
Yeah,
who's your second team here?
I went with Wisconsin.
Well, that's not what I thought you were going to say either. Okay,
Yeah,
go ahead, Wisconsin. Luke Fickle, you think the Wisconsin air raid is over?
yeah. I mean, it's just not a traditional Wisconsin offense that we're used to seeing.
Right.
So I don't know if they need to kind of establish that and get back to it, or maybe try to go younger. Maybe.
I
I
mean,
mean, I
Luke
don't know.
Fickle's
It's
not that
just,
old.
yeah, I mean, I know he's not that old, but I mean, you were used to, I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago. You're used to seeing Wisconsin within the top 10, top 12 every year.
Yeah, I agree.
And, you're going on like year, what, 4, 5 that they've been irrelevant.
Yeah. And you're not seeing your Monty Balls, your Dwyers, your Melvin Gordons. You're not seeing your running backs with the big hog mollies up front running it for 200 yards a game either, which is that's what we're
Yeah.
normally seeing with them, right?
I mean, it was a
Uh,
guarantee with them. They were having 1,000-yard rusher every year.
oh yeah, by like week six, they were. Um, and staying in the Big Ten, I think Iowa would be a perfect candidate as well, too, right? Ferentz has been there for 20 some odd years. He's the most tenured coach in the country, but kind of similar to Mike Gundy. Like he built Iowa to what they are, but just hasn't kept up with the times. I mean, we haven't seen a relevant Iowa offense ever, like under Ferentz, I don't think. And they brought in the guy to do it, I think, with Gronowski, when in the FCS Heisman last year, but he just hasn't translated. I know they had a 38-point game against Rutgers, but like that's against Rutgers. I want to see Iowa. That's another team, maybe not as good as Wisconsin, but up there to, beat a Ohio State or a Michigan or a Penn State or Oregon type team, once a year. Like they're good for one of those wins pretty much a year. And I just don't see it right now with them.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
Do you have any more?
I'm not saying the last one.
I'll say it for you. The NC State Wolfpack, I think, could use this shake up. We'll say the homer pick there, but Dorn's been there, and it seems like he's good for a 7-5, 8-4 team, and NC State's better than that. Like they just are. Um,
Yeah, but
they not like
who are you going to get without
it's
spending
this
money?
it's the same thinking you have to think as like a Virginia Tech or like a um, kind of like what Vanderbilt did, right? Either get a hometown person or go younger, where you're going young and kind of taking a risk on that he's not going to leave, like Fran Brown at Syracuse. So you're going to go for a first time coach and hope that he can pull it off. So like an offense, a coordinating guru or a defensive coordinating guru, and kind of pulling from like Sun Belts or Conference USA or American, and I kind of taking a risk instead of being consistently mediocre. Like I'm a Steelers fan. We haven't won a playoff game in 9 years, and mediocre Mike Tomlin I think needs to go. But it's that same case. Mike Tomlin will get us to the playoffs and win, have winning seasons every single year. But are we willing to risk a potential collapse if we let him go and hire somebody that fails? That's kind of like the whole extent of this exercise is are they going to do it? Probably not because they're happy with Dorn getting 8 wins a year. But I know the fans are fed up from him, just from you and literally.
Yeah.
All right, well, let's move on into quarter three here. Some superlatives. Player of the week, I'll start here. Julian Sand. One thing we're not talking about is Ohio State. And the reason we're not talking about him because Jeremiah Smith really just hasn't done anything, but they really haven't had to get him involved yet. But Julian Sand went 23 to 27 last week, three big time throws, no turnover worthy plays. I think he was like in the 91, 92 area for PFF, one of the top quarterback plays last year, and he's just under the radar. I think he's, young kid kind of getting getting the air underneath his wings here. And if they keep playing the way they're playing, I know they got a tough game against Illinois this weekend. They keep playing against the way they're playing. Why not undefeated? Why not beat Michigan for the first time in 4 years? Why not run back-to-back national titles? I don't, I think he deserves at least that. And then my second player of the game is Nico, just because he had the best game of his career and beat Penn State. Like he looked like the Nico that we all thought we would see, and just hasn't panned out. But he did just for one game. Not saying UCLA is back.
Yeah, I went with Julian Sand as well, but my second pick, I went with Ty Simpson for
Yes.
Alabama. I think he's finally starting to get settled in, and that offense is really starting to click now that they got their starting running back, and it's taking a little bit of pressure off him. So, you know, Vanderbilt's got a pretty good defense, and he played an absolute great game. I think it was 23 of 31, 30, 31, two touchdowns. And
Yeah.
I noticed, he's starting to limit his turnovers. I think he only had
That was
one
his
pick
first
last
turnover.
week.
First turnover of the year.
Yeah. So, I mean,
Why
he's
not him for
flying
the
under the
Heisman?
radar.
Yeah, why not him
Yeah.
for the Heisman? They got their Jam Miller running back too. So, that's Bama's gonna be scary, man. Everybody was I had them as winning the SEC or coming close to it. So I can still think they can do it. Game of the week. I didn't really pick one game, but I picked like a time frame. That 3:30 slate, I think kind of crushed it for everybody. They had the most comeback wins. That was your Bama Vandy, your Penn State UCLA, your Florida Texas game. Like that slate was just crazy. The quad box was electric. Um, Glued to the TV during that one. Who was your game of the week?
I went with Miami FSU because that's always such a good rivalry, and it didn't disappoint
Yeah,
once again.
I think that rivalry is kind of back, especially if if Norvell can get a quarterback. Maybe it's just me hating Tommy Castellanos, but if he can get a quarterback, like why not FSU Miami rivalry back? Like that'll be an intense one for sure. Winners of the week, who you got?
I went with Texas A&M. I really like what Jeff Lebby's doing down at Mississippi State. Like I said, this
Yeah,
is only what year two for him. But Texas
yeah,
A&M, I mean, Mississippi State's a good team. I mean, when you're playing in front of what 105,000 fans,
yeah. They kept it
it's,
close
it's
for
a
a
good,
half.
yeah. So I went with Texas A&M, Cincinnati,
Yeah.
and I went with UVA. I mean, usually when you up to the top five team, you always have a hiccup the following week, but UVA pulled it out in overtime, so I got to stick with them.
I think just in general, the winner of the year so far, and we'll do our midseason awards next week, but the winner of the year so far, in my mind, is Mississippi State because they were 2-10 last year and they couldn't beat anybody. They lost to Toledo last year. So like, the way that they've turned around and to a formidable opponent in the SEC, almost beating Tennessee, playing Texas A&M good for a half. I don't know how many more wins they have on their schedule because it is pretty tough, but just the turnaround they have in quality of play, I think, is electric. But my winner of the week is the UCLA Bruins and Jerry Neuheisel, man. I really hope UCLA gives the kid a shot, or at least the next coach gives him a shot at being an offensive coordinator because he played a perfect game plan against a pretty good Penn State defense. I would love to see Newhousel, if it's not UCLA, get a shot somewhere. But that's my winner of the week. Loser of the week, it's me. I'm a big fat loser thinking Penn State and Texas are going to be in the national championship game at the beginning of the season. You trying to warn me? I've been high on Penn State and Aller for 3 years now. I've been high on Texas and Sark and Arch for 2 years now. But I'm the loser of the week. I don't think either one of them are going to make the playoffs at this point. I think they're both probably 8 or 9 win teams that just on the outside looking in for the playoffs. So I'm the loser of the week.
Yeah, I mean, I got to stick with the same two teams. I mean, I went Penn State and Texas.
Yeah. Oh man, that's a very, very Debbie Downer way to go into our game picks, but let's go do it. Hit our Q4 game picks on the year. Andrew with a commanding lead at 48 wins and 18 losses. I am 8 games back with 40 wins and 26 losses. The locks are 35 and 29, had a rough week last week, but we're still above 500, so let's keep that going as well. 10 games this week. First one, we're gonna start with a G5 game that I think is flying under everybody's radar. If you like to watch offensive points and you like to watch kids that are playing for their life, watch USF, University of South Florida versus North Texas this weekend. North Texas is 1.5 point favorites. Green Wave offense. I don't know if I've watched them a couple times. They're electric. They're fast. They're running the ball every, 10, 15 seconds. And that's why I think they're going to win this game. Give me North Texas to win.
I went with South Florida.
Yeah, that's probably the safe pick, but everybody just, ride Andrew's picks because he's the winner of this podcast here. Next game is Ohio State versus Illinois. Ohio State's 14.5 point favorites. Illinois had a couple or had a one loss against Indiana that didn't look great. I think it's going to be honestly kind of the same. I don't think they're where Bill and Will wants them to be. Still good for an Illinois team, but I think Ohio State wins by at least 14. So give me Ohio State.
And yeah, I've got Ohio State as well.
Next game is Bama versus Mizzou. Bama's favored by 2.5 points. Mizzou sneaky undefeated. Drinkwitz having another great year. Watch for Drinkwitz potentially make a move to a bigger NIL funded team this year if a big job opening opens up. Florida, Florida. Um, who do you have in this game? Bama versus Mizzou.
Here I'm going with Bama.
I am too. I think it's going to be close. I think Mizzou is one of those teams like Penn State that they'll be 10-2. They'll make the playoffs. I don't know how much they'll do after that. Pitt versus FSU. FSU is favored by 10.5 points. I think the downfall starts here. I think we're going to start seeing a couple more losses for Florida State. Pitt starting their freshman quarterback, getting a little bit of a boost last week. So give me Pitt here with a huge upset.
Yeah, I'm sticking with FSU.
Indiana versus Oregon, maybe game of the weekend. Oregon's favored by 7.5 points. I'm not sure that that's not too high. Um, who do you have winning this game here?
I'm going with Oregon. It's in Eugene.
I am too. If it was at Indiana, I might. If it was 7.5, I'd still probably go Oregon, but I think it'd be closer. But Signetti can shock the world here. Uh, the River Shootout. Um, we know it by no other name, but the Red River Shootout, Oklahoma versus Texas. Uh, Oklahoma's favored by 1.5 points. That line means that John Mateer is back. They would be Texas favored by 3.5 if Mateer doesn't play. Um, Regardless, Oklahoma, Texas, who you got in the Red River Shootout?
Well, I think I'm gonna go with Oklahoma.
See, I'm going Texas here. I think Texas, this is a perfect bounce back game in a rivalry game. Nothing makes sense in rivalry games. We all know that. Nebraska versus Maryland. Nebraska's favored by 6.5 points. Maryland, awful, awful, awful. That should have been a loser of the week, too. Awful loss last week, going into the third quarter, up 20 points and giving up 24 straight unanswered points to Washington to lose that game after looking dominant in the first half. I think that they start to fall apart here. We talked a little bit about fake undefeated teams last week. Give me Nebraska here as well.
Yeah, I've got Nebraska as well.
Michigan versus USC. USC is favored by 2.5 points. I think the travel gets Michigan. I think USA wins this game. I don't think Michigan's for real. I think Sharon Moore's job is going to be called into question as well because he is too conservative with Bryce Underwood. Give me USC.
I'm going with Michigan.
I can't vote for cheaters, so I will always pick against Michigan. BYU versus
Hey, you know how I feel when you get North Carolina on the slate.
BYU versus Arizona. BYU is favored by 1.5 points. Sneaky undefeated team. I didn't get your thoughts on it. What do you think of a quarterback wearing number 47?
You know, I love it.
See, I should love it too, but it just bothers me, and I don't know why. I that would be something that I should love. Who you got, BYU or Arizona?
Yeah, I'm gonna stick with BYU.
I am too. I think Arizona's having a better year than last year, but BYU undefeated, flying under the radar. And then Arizona versus Utah at night game. Utah is favored by 5.5 points. Utah at night, always pick them. Give me Utah.
Yes, definitely Utah.
All right, here and then now we're going to just go over some of the locks of the week. Just let me know if you want to talk about any of the games. Let's start in some Maction, baby. Maction. Northern Illinois versus Eastern Michigan. Northern Illinois is, or Eastern Michigan's favored by 1.5 points. Give me Northern Illinois plus 1.5. Nebraska, Maryland. Nebraska's favored by 5.5 points. I think they win by at least that. So give me Nebraska minus 5.5. Kansas State versus TCU. TCU is favored by 1.5 points. Give me Kansas State plus 1.5. I think they've turned it around, especially after good game versus Baylor last week, which is another good game that we didn't talk about. Stanford versus SMU. SMU is favored by 19.5 points. I think Stanford slows this game down and keeps it within 3 touchdowns. So give me Stanford plus 19.5. North Texas versus USF. I think this is going to be an offensive affair. Give me over 66.5 points. Bama versus Mizzou. I think this will be a little bit higher scoring than normal too. Give me over 51.5 points. Pitt versus FSU. I think Pitt's going to win outright. So give me Pitt plus 10.5. Texas versus Oklahoma. Give me under 43.5. I think this will be a defensive game. Especially if John Mateer doesn't play. I think it'll be super, super defensive and low scoring. TCU versus Kansas State, give me over 55.5 points. I don't think either team has a really good defense. And then the final game, Georgia versus Auburn. Georgia's favored by 3.5 points. I think they win by at least 1 or 2 touchdowns here. So it's going to be Georgia
Yeah.
minus 3.5.
Yep.
All right, well, that's the show for us this week. As always, thank you for listening, and we'll see you next week.